Pull back the mulch around a tomato plant that has been treated with coffee grounds the right way, and the soil underneath will not look like dead dirt. It will look darker, looser, and more alive. But pour the same coffee grounds in a thick, wet layer around a small plant, and the exact same ingredient can seal the surface like a mat. That is why some gardeners call coffee grounds a secret soil builder, while others call them one of the fastest ways to ruin a pot. And the strange thing is that both groups are telling the truth. Every morning, millions of people brew coffee, dump the grounds, and move on with their day. But for decades, gardeners have looked at those dark leftovers and wondered if they belong in the garden instead of the trash. It seems logical. Coffee grounds are natural. They smell earthy. They look like rich soil, and they are completely free. For a gardener, that sounds almost too good to ignore. Over time, coffee grounds became one of the most recommended kitchen scraps in gardening. Some people sprinkle them around tomatoes. Others add them to compost piles. Some mix them into raised beds. Some even feed them to worms. Yet, if you spend enough time talking to gardeners, you'll notice something unusual. One gardener says coffee grounds transform their soil. Another says they caused mold. Someone else complains about fungus gnats. Another says they created a hard crust that stopped water from soaking in properly. And suddenly, the conversation becomes confusing. Are coffee grounds good? Are they bad? Should you use them or avoid them? But that question misses something important. The real question is not whether coffee grounds are good or bad. The real question is what they are actually doing inside the soil. Because the moment coffee grounds touch the ground, they become part of a hidden biological system most gardeners never see. And that hidden world is where the real story begins. When most people look at a garden bed, they see plants. They notice tomatoes, peppers, flowers, herbs, leaves, fruit, color, growth. What they don't see is the engine making all of it possible. The soil, not dirt, soil. And there is a difference. Dirt is simply material on the ground. Soil is alive. A healthy handful of garden soil is one of the busiest ecosystems on Earth. Inside that handful are minerals, organic matter, microscopic fungi, bacteria, insects, air pockets, water channels, decomposing roots, and billions of living organisms interacting every second. Even the roots themselves are not simply drinking water. Roots are constantly communicating with microbes, exchanging nutrients, creating partnerships, building relationships. Many of the things we blame on plant leaves actually begin underground weeks earlier. A plant does not suddenly become unhealthy. The warning signs often start in the root zone long before we notice them above ground. This is why experienced gardeners often spend more time improving soil than fixing plants. Because healthy soil usually creates healthy plants, and unhealthy soil eventually creates problems, no matter how much fertilizer you add later. This becomes important when we talk about coffee grounds, because coffee grounds do not directly feed plants in the way many people imagine. Instead, they influence the environment around the roots. And that influence can be either helpful or harmful, depending on how it is used. That distinction changes everything. Many gardeners make a simple assumption. They see coffee grounds as another form of organic matter, and technically they are, but coffee grounds behave differently from many other materials commonly added to gardens. Think about dry leaves, think about straw, think about wood chips, think about chunky compost. All of these materials contain spaces between particles. Those spaces matter. Air moves through them, water moves through them, microbes can access them gradually. Coffee grounds are different. Used coffee grounds are already finely ground. They are extremely small particles, and when they are wet, those particles like to stick together. At first glance, this seems harmless, but something interesting happens when enough of them accumulate. Instead of acting like loose organic matter, they begin behaving more like a dense layer, a layer that can restrict airflow, a layer that can slow oxygen movement, a layer that can trap moisture. This is where coffee grounds stop being a hack and start becoming biology. A small amount mixed into soil may support microbial activity. A thick layer on top of the soil may create an entirely different environment. And this is why two gardeners can use the same ingredient and get completely opposite results. Coffee grounds are not dangerous because they are coffee. They become dangerous when they stop behaving like organic matter and start behaving like a wet blanket. That single idea explains most success stories and most failures. Coffee grounds have gained a reputation as a fertilizer, but that description is only partly true. A better way to think about coffee grounds is as a soil ingredient, not a miracle fertilizer, not a complete plant food, a soil ingredient. When used, coffee grounds break down, they contribute organic matter. Organic matter is incredibly valuable because it improves soil structure over time. It helps sandy soils hold moisture. It helps heavy soils become more workable. It supports microbial activity. It contributes to long-term soil health. Used coffee grounds also contain modest amounts of nitrogen, not enough to replace balanced fertilization, but enough to become useful as part of a broader system. They also contain trace trace minerals, and organic compounds that microbes can process during decomposition. The important thing is understanding the timeline. Many gardeners imagine coffee grounds acting like an instant nutrient boost. That is not what usually happens. Coffee grounds work slowly, the benefits appear as decomposition unfolds, weeks pass, microbes work, organic matter changes, the soil evolves, and that slow transformation is often where the real value comes from. Imagine sprinkling a thin layer of coffee grounds into a garden bed. The moment they enter the soil, they stop being waste. They become food. Not necessarily food for plants, food for microbes. Bacteria begin colonizing the material, fungi start extending through it, decomposers move in, tiny organisms begin breaking complex compounds into simpler forms. A process that may look invisible from above becomes incredibly active below. This hidden workforce is one of nature's greatest recycling systems. The microbes are not interested in growing tomatoes. They are interested in surviving, in feeding, in reproducing. But while doing that work, they transform raw organic matter into forms that become useful within the soil ecosystem. This is why mold sometimes appears on coffee grounds. Many gardeners panic the moment they see fuzzy growth. But mold itself is not automatically a disaster. In many situations, mold simply means decomposition is occurring. Life is breaking down organic matter. The process is working. However, context matters. A little fungal activity in an outdoor compost pile is very different from thick mold growing on constantly wet coffee grounds sitting in a small indoor pot. One environment has airflow, the other may not. One has diversity, the other may be restricted, and that difference changes the outcome. The soil food web loves organic matter. But even beneficial processes can become problematic when moisture, airflow, and balance disappear. Now we arrive at the mistake. The mistake is so simple that most gardeners never notice it. They use too much. A gardener finishes their morning coffee. The grounds go into the flower bed. The next morning, more grounds. Then more. Then more. It feels harmless, natural, even responsible. Weeks later, a thick layer has formed. The surface stays damp. Water moves differently. Air movement slows. The root zone changes. And suddenly plants begin struggling. The gardener blames the coffee. But the problem was never the coffee grounds alone. The problem was the layer. The same ingredient that wakes up soil life in one garden can suffocate roots in another. In gardening, more is not stronger. Sometimes, more is the exact thing that causes the damage. This is one of the most common mistakes with houseplants. Someone pours an entire coffee filter into a pot. The grounds stay wet. The surface becomes compact. Gnats appear. Mold develops. The plant declines. Yet the same amount spread through a large compost pile might disappear without causing any issue at all. The lesson is surprisingly simple. Coffee grounds are not powerful because of what they are. They are powerful because of how they interact with the environment around them. Another source of confusion comes from the difference between fresh and used coffee grounds. Many gardening discussions treat them as the same thing. They are not. Fresh grounds have not been brewed. Used grounds have already been through the coffee making process. During brewing, many soluble compounds are washed out. What remains is different from what started in the coffee machine. For gardeners, this matters. Used grounds are generally the safer option. They are less concentrated and easier to integrate into composting systems and soil building efforts. Fresh grounds can sometimes create stronger reactions because more compounds remain intact. Yet even with used grounds, the same rule still applies. Quantity matters, placement matters, moisture matters. Interestingly, one of the most repeated claims about coffee grounds is that they dramatically acidify soil. The reality is often less dramatic than people expect. For most home gardeners, texture and application method usually have a much greater impact than acidity. The debate over pH gets most of the attention. Meanwhile, airflow and soil structure quietly determine whether plants thrive or struggle. Coffee grounds tend to perform best when they become part of a larger system. Compost piles are one of the safest examples. There, coffee grounds mix with leaves, cardboard, twigs, and countless other materials. No single ingredient dominates. Everything balances. Worm bins can also handle moderate amounts of coffee grounds when combined with other materials. Outdoor garden beds usually offer more forgiveness than containers because there is greater soil volume and better environmental buffering. Raised beds often fall into this category as well. Coffee grounds can be distributed over a much larger area. Problems become less likely when concentration stays low. Now compare that to a small container. A container has limited space, limited airflow, limited drainage capacity. Every input has a larger impact. A tablespoon in a large garden bed may be insignificant. The same tablespoon repeatedly added to a small pot may completely alter surface conditions. This is why tomatoes growing in open beds often tolerate coffee grounds better than seedlings growing in small starter containers. It is also why herbs on a balcony require more caution than vegetables planted directly in the ground. The smaller the environment, the more careful carefully, you must use concentrated organic materials. The gardeners who get the best results usually share one habit. They do not treat coffee grounds as a star ingredient. They treat them as one ingredient among many. Imagine two gardeners. One dumps wet grounds into the same spot every day. The other loosens the grounds, mixes them with dry leaves, and spreads them across a wider area. Months later, their gardens may look very different. The second gardener understands decomposition. They understand dilution. They understand balance. Used coffee grounds can be mixed into compost piles alongside shredded leaves, straw, paper, or cardboard. Those dry materials create airflow and balance moisture. If adding grounds directly to garden beds, a thin application is usually far safer than a thick layer. Mixing them lightly into the soil surface often works better than leaving them concentrated on top. For containers, restraint becomes even more important. A little can go a long way. Outdoor beds offer more flexibility, but even there, spreading grounds broadly is usually better than creating piles. And perhaps most importantly, avoid turning coffee grounds into a daily deposit zone. The soil does not need the same material dumped in the same place over and over again. Healthy soil thrives on diversity. The wider the variety of organic inputs, the more balanced the system tends to become. So what is the final verdict on coffee grounds? They are not a miracle. They are not useless. They are not the secret ingredient that transforms every garden overnight. And they are not the villains some gardeners make them out to be. Coffee grounds are simply organic matter with unique characteristics. Used thoughtfully, they can contribute to healthier soil. Used carelessly, they can create avoidable problems. The difference is rarely the ingredient itself. The difference is understanding how that ingredient behaves once it enters the soil. This is why experienced gardeners often seem less interested in products and more interested in processes. They know that healthy gardens are rarely built from shortcuts. They are built from observation, patience, balance, and an understanding of what is happening beneath the surface. Because underneath every healthy garden is a story most people never see. A story of microbes recycling nutrients, roots exploring tiny spaces, organic matter becoming soil, life feeding life. Coffee grounds can become part of that story. Not because they are magical, but because they participate in the same natural cycle as every fallen leaf, every decomposing root, and every piece of compost that eventually becomes earth again. The next time you finish your morning coffee, you do not need to see those grounds as trash. You also do not need to see them as a miracle cure. See them for what they really are. One small ingredient in a much larger living system. And perhaps that is the most valuable gardening lesson of all. The garden does not reward the gardener who adds the most. It rewards the gardener who notices what the soil is trying to say. And when you learn to listen to the soil, even something as ordinary as a cup of coffee can teach you how a garden truly works.